So Fleming, what was the atmosphere like in Metallica when Cliff was in the band compared to when Jason was in the band?
All the time Cliff was in the band, it was like these four kids that had known each other for a long time, that kind of, it's us against the world, and they were all, they're basically fighting the Metallica fight. We need to make Metallica the best thing ever. It kind of changed a bit when Jason entered the band, which is also well documented, because Jason was a fan and they actually hated that about him. That's probably also part of the story about the missing bass on Injustice for All. They just probably tried to get a reaction from him, but he was still too new in the band to do anything. I mean, I'm guessing what they wanted him to do was to speak out and be his own personality, so, which is always more interesting than, fans can be annoying, right? Everybody who just says yes and you're great to everything you do, that's not very good. And I think eventually he got fed up with being, the new kid for such a long time. But, during the Justice for All recordings, that thing hadn't come yet. So it was, as far as I'm concerned, all hunky-dory. We were all happy and doing it. Jason actually, because we got into a bit of a time trouble, he actually recorded the basses at night while we were sleeping with the assistant engineer Toby, and we would like before we start, we'd say, you do this and that, just play through with him a couple of times, and he would like kind of perfect that during the night. So the bass tracks on Injustice for All are actually really, really, really good, though nobody ever heard them except me, Jason, and a couple of other guys. And then we come in the morning and check it out, and everybody was really happy. So there you go. But it was slightly different because he was new, and also because he was so much a fan.
Were you surprised with how in the final mix the bass essentially isn't there?
Oh yeah, I was like, what the? I went, okay, that's the way to do it, but I think some of my rough mixes are actually better than that. But I mean, buy the huge the anniversary box, the big with the vinyls and stuff. There's one full CD of my rough mixes. That sounds pretty good. But yeah, I mean, it's a statement in time. People always ask, why don't they ask you to remix it? No, because it's out. It's done, and then that's the way it is. You can't go back and change it because it would be something totally different. It was like when McCartney remixed Let It Be. It sounded really boring because he took all the quirkiness that Phil Spector done. Those kind of things. So I mean, just leave it. It is the way it's supposed to be. So yeah, I'm a fan of that album anyway. Even though I can't hear the bass. Also, that album is probably one of the albums in the history of music that inspired most bands to start. I mean, there's a lot of metal bands out there that if you ask them, why did you start the band? They say, well, we heard Injustice for All and we want to be like those guys. So, maybe we should turn the bass down on all music from now.
Did you ever talk to Jason about the missing bass? Did you ever get his thoughts on it?
No, unfortunately not, no. I'd love to. I was supposed to meet him a couple of years ago, and then, timing and all this stuff, and it went haywire, because it would have been great to have heard what, for me and him to sit down and talk about it. But I think it's a mix between them trying to get a reaction from Jason and them not, them meaning Lars and James, not having processed Cliff's dead yet, and actually still mourning. And not come to terms with the fact that he wasn't in the band anymore because he was dead. So yeah, but I don't know. I mean, you're gonna have to talk to the guys about that. But that's my guessing.
One thing I've never really understood about the whole situation is that even if you're looking to haze Jason for whatever reason, by removing the bass, the whole album suffers to a certain extent. Unless, of course, the band felt it sounded better without the bass.
They probably thought that the bass was going to be like, the low end of the guitar riff, which is basically what it is now. I'm pretty sure if you had the mix up and you turned the bass off, you would hear the difference. So it's definitely there. although it's not as pronounced as it is in a lot of other albums. But yeah, it is strange, yeah. But, you know, I mean, maybe they sat down and heard it and went, that's fucking great. I can hit my drums are loud, the guitars are loud, the vocal are loud. Fine. Next.
You brought up a point a couple of moments ago about Cliff's death, which of course is one of the biggest tragedies in metal history. For you personally, how did you hear the news and what was your reaction to it, if I may ask?
It was horrible. I was sleeping at my house and my mom called me because she gets up earlier than I do. And she said, one of the guys in Metallica died. I was like, what? And she didn't know which one it was. So I had to, you know, make a lot of phone calls and you know, just to find out what the hell is going on. But it was in all news in Denmark had the story. So, and this was before the internet. So, you know, you had to listen to radios and, you know, call people. But yeah, it was devastating. I mean, they were on the way to play a gig in Copenhagen. We were going to meet up that afternoon, right? And bus fucking turns over. When Cliff was in the band, it was you know, they were, you gotta understand the 3 albums I did with Metallica, it was like on the rise. Every album just went one level higher all the time, and it's always easier when you know, you can see it's getting better and better and better. Once you get to the top and have to stay there, that's when all the problems sets in, which everybody knows if they've seen their movie.
Yeah, for sure. So what was Cliff like in the studio? From what I've heard, he was the most musically gifted. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, he was the only one that actually been schooled in music. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if he was the better musician. I rate James pretty high up there as one. I think James is probably the best rhythm guitar player in the world. But he was definitely the most schooled music-wise, and some of the parts he came up with were things that nobody in a metal band would ever have done except for Cliff. So yeah, he was great, and he was just a mellow, kind, you know, dude that, you know, we hung out. You know, we recorded at night, and we kind of made it so that we started at 7. Actually, on Master of Puppets, we started at 6 at my house, and they came at 8. My wife made dinner for them, and then we discussed what we needed to do during the night, and we'd walk to the studio from my house, which was like 3 minutes. And once we'd finished recording, it would be 4 or 5, something like that. And they would always make sure they got to the hotel, because they were staying at a hotel on Master of Puppets, because now they were on a major label, so they could afford it. And the morning buffet opened at 6, so they always they were there at 6 so they could eat breakfast buffet and then go to bed and sleep. So they got up and got to my house to eat dinner. So during that time, you know, once we're done and they were going to like waste an hour or so, we were sitting, you know, having a beer, playing poker. He liked playing poker. So yeah, he was just a cool dude to hang out with. He was really nice, really gentle. Knew a lot of stuff about things, you know, so you could sit and talk with him for hours and hours.
That's awesome. You know, when it comes to your studio, one of the interesting things about your relationship with Metallica, in my opinion, is that during the making of Ride the Lightning, they slept in your studio instead of getting a hotel.
Yeah.
And they slept during the day and recorded at night. Something along those lines?
No, it was just, in those days, the studios were pretty booked. So we had, like, as a standard, we had a 10 to 6 schedule, and then a 1 hour changeover, and then 7 till basically we should be done before 9, because then the morning engineer came in. But we could have worked. The good thing about working at night was that you could actually work as long as you wanted, but you'd still only pay for one session. So they actually got a few more hours out of that. And I mean, most musicians are used to working at night. I sent Kirk to the showers once because he smelled. I think the first song we actually did on Ride the Lightning was the Ride the Lightning song, but I'm not sure. But it was either that or Creeping Death. It was one of the really long songs. Remember that choir thing where they shout "die" and we overdubbed that tons of times. And I sent them all in there, and I was at one point we'd done like 5 or 6 takes, and they came in and had a listen. I think we should do some more, and I kind of instructed Lars to say on this take, because I knew that Cliff was just faking it. He wasn't singing. So I said to everybody, on this take, just fake it, just so we can hear whether Cliff is singing or not. And they went in and no sound came out. So I was like, Cliff, you fuck. So yeah, but I mean...
That's hilarious. Why wasn't Cliff singing?
Because he didn't like the sound of his voice. I don't know, maybe he thought he couldn't sing. He's a bass player. You never know what happens in the minds of a bass player.
So at what point did you realize that the band was going to be huge?
During recording of Ride the Lightning. Already then I knew this was going to be something special. I couldn't be sure that they would, that they would actually make it, but it didn't really matter because I thought the music and the sound and everything was so good that no matter what, that I knew this was going to be an album I would be proud of. So, yeah. Sometime halfway through Ride the Lightning.
So when it comes to the recording process for Ride the Lightning, from what I understand, you recorded Lars's drum parts in a warehouse?
Yeah, also on Master of Puppets, yeah.
Was there any particular reason why you chose the warehouse to record his drum parts?
To get a really good drum ambience, to get the sound to be as loud as possible. And on all the albums we did, there was this mantra called no reverb. So instead of using reverb, I just recorded the sounds of the rooms we recorded in. Because that way you get some depth in the stereo picture. So we used a lot of room mics and stuff. That's why I put him in that room. It was a bit of a challenge because I think it was cold winter and we had to heat the room. It was like freezing outside. So we had these gas heated that kind of heated the room, which meant that we had to get a guy in and tune the drums all the time, but it turned out good, so there you go.
So in terms of your relationship with Lars, from what I understand, you essentially gave Lars drumming lessons during Ride the Lightning. Is this correct?
Yeah, that's actually true. That comes from Lars being from a jazz background, because I can't be sure about this, but I'm pretty sure that Lars's focus with Metallica was on doing all these great fills. So I think the way Lars saw the songs was, I have this fill that goes then it's and then this fill comes in, and I think he never gave it much thought that what happens between the fills. You have to be fucking steady, and there have to be an equal length between the kick and the snare and all this stuff. So yeah, me and Jake, his real name is also Fleming, but his drum roadie at the time, who was a drummer for a Danish band called Maltese Falcon, I think. We kind of, told him, then you go boom, boom, took his leg, and when you do this, and then you do this with the snare, and they have to be, and I don't think he ever thought about that. He just thought about putting energy into the song. So basically he played like a jazz drummer. You listen to what everybody else is doing, you do something that fits in, fine. Next song.
That's funny. And so how did he develop as a drummer from Ride the Lightning to Injustice?
Well, all of them actually developed tremendously, and it was a huge development, both in their playing skills, but also in their songwriting. In my opinion, they got better and better musicians from album to album. But with Metallica, we've always set the bar really high. Actually, they've always aimed to do stuff they couldn't do. So actually, they were always pushing themselves to be better and better, and it was like that with all the albums I've done. And basically they weren't able to perform their own songs because they were too difficult, but we got it on tape anyway, which is a great way to develop as a musician, and just basically get your chops together. So yeah, I mean they've developed tons during that, and even also with the songwriting. I mean, in my opinion, they've gotten better and better at songwriting as well throughout their whole life. So, yeah, they developed a lot.
So, Fleming, when you first started working with Metallica, essentially they reached out to you. How did that all come together?
It was Lars calling up, as far as I recall, asking whether I would be interested in doing a metal band from San Francisco. And I went, yeah, great. I mean, but you're Danish, so what, So they had kind of done the math and figured out that for the same amount of money they would pay for a week in a studio in the States, and they were not happy with the sound on Kill 'Em All, they could get 2 weeks in Europe. Plus, they could then go and do some shows and actually make money to do the album, because they were on an independent label. They didn't have like a label backup, so they wanted to tour, record more. And they, as far as I've been told, they've heard about me because of the job I did with Rich Blackmore. And I think they sat down and heard some of the albums I've done. And then they decided, well, that's what we're doing. We're going to go to Europe. We're going to record the album. And at the same time, or during that, they got Q Prime as management. So they started looking for major record label deals. But, I mean, basically, they just called and asked if I was interested. And I said, yes, sure. And we actually started the process out once they got to the studio and we needed to start recording. We actually started out by listening to Kill 'Em All, because there's the famous break-in incident in their live truck. So they get most of their equipment stolen. And James had a modified Marshall amp that he really likes. And, of course, nobody knew what the modification was. So we actually listened to Kill 'Em All a couple of times and some of the guitar sounds. So I got a pretty good picture of what the band was all about before we started. We did a session in the studio where we got everybody that I knew on the metal scene then, which was kind of just starting out. But, people that had good Marshall gear, I had them bring all their amps and all their cabinets to the studio. And James would, play them all and figure out which one he wanted to record on.
One of the songs on that album that sticks out to me is Fade to Black. Do you remember recording that particular song?
Yeah, I actually do, because I really like it too. And that was one of the songs that, in my memory, that didn't take that long to record, because I think they all really liked it, so they all played it really well. But yeah, obviously it took the time it should. But yeah, it's a good song. I like it.
For me, one of the reasons that song sticks out on that record is that it's very different in a lot of ways from the other tracks on Ride the Lightning. It's the band's first ever power ballad. For that reason, was the band apprehensive at all about recording Fade to Black?
Not to my recollection, no. I think Cliff was probably involved in the songwriting of that big time. I could imagine Fade to Black. I haven't seen the credits, but I would imagine that all that was Cliff, and they kind of, said, well, yeah, you let yourself rip. But no, I've no apprehensions about that. They were more like, there was some discussions whether or not, what is it? Is it Escape? That was like that kind of commercial song.
Escape's the one.
Yeah, that was, because that was kind of their giveaway to get a major label deal, that they recorded that so that, if eventually they could have a single. It's never been released as a single, I think, but that was kind of what they thought. We'll do this shorter song, which has like a singable riff to it, and which was more like what everybody else was doing in the 80s. That was what we discussed, not the other stuff. No, not Fade to Black at all. That we kind of just went, yeah, that's cool, let's get going with that.
Another one of the great songs on Ride the Lightning is For Whom the Bell Tolls. How did you guys get that bell sound specifically?
I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's Lars hitting an anvil with a metal hammer. And then we sped it down so it sounded like a bell. But, they have the tape, so obviously they use that sound for the live shows. But it's either that or we took it off some effects album, and which was a vinyl then. You buy it and then you have the right to use it on. But I'm pretty sure, because the studio was on the first floor, and we carried that anvil up to the first floor, and it was like seriously heavy. And Lars was banging away on it. It was actually it was one of the funny moments when we did that album. Lars hitting the anvil. No, not on one, Lars, on two. What the fuck is two? He just put it where he felt for it. Lars is Lars has grown up in a jazz family, so Lars' playing is, always when he plays, he listens to what everybody else is doing and fits in. People saying Lars is a bad drummer, I think people who says that kind of exclude themselves, in my opinion, because they don't know what they're talking about. It's like people saying Ringo Starr is a bad drummer. They have no idea. I don't know what that is all about. It's probably people who play instrument themselves and think they're technically good. But, that's not what it's about. It's about playing music. And if you don't have that musical mind, you can be as technically good as you want. If you can't play with other people, you're fucked.
Do you remember Cliff ever playing any instruments in the studio aside from the bass?
I have this vision of him playing an acoustic guitar, but it could be just me imagining it. Not on tape, anyway. He only played bass on tape, so. But I'm pretty sure he was sitting with you have guitars lying around in the studio everywhere, and I'm pretty sure he picked one up.
So, of course, the last Metallica studio record Cliff appeared on is Master of Puppets. What was the vibe like in the studio during the making of that record?
We had this vision of Master of Puppets in our heads, and it was all the same vision, and that's why that album is so great, because everybody wanted to go where we ended, and we all sort of pulled in the same direction, so it was really good.
When it came to the title track, Master of Puppets, did you feel that there was going to be something special about this song?
Yeah, we kind of knew that also because we knew it was going to be the title track. Metallica always do serious pre-production, so we already knew the running order once we started recording the album. We didn't record them in order, but, we knew that was going to be significant. Also because the lyrics are so strong. And, the whole story about who controls your life and what you're doing, it was, it's kind of a universal story. So we knew that right off the bat. We didn't know that they were going to play it like 40 years later, but,
Yeah, for sure. I think some of the great things about that song are the tempo changes and the complete changes in melody. I remember at a Metallica concert I went to, when they played Master of Puppets, right around the 3.5-minute mark during the interlude, everyone in the crowd basically started singing the interlude melody.
People know that by heart. It's incredible. And it's one of those things that you do those solo or melody parts, and once crowds pick up on that, they really love that. But, there's no way you can say whether that's going to work or not. You just have to get lucky. But, well written. There you go.
Yeah, for sure. In another interview of yours, I remember you mentioning that during the Master of Puppets session for Sanitarium particularly, James was reluctant to record vocals for one of the high parts of that song because he didn't want to go that high.
Yeah.
What was the story there exactly?
Well, it's difficult to sing high, especially if you're a man. I don't know whether we cheated by speeding the tape down. I know that some of the songs on Master of Puppets, we actually recorded them lower and then very speeded them up so that it got even tighter. That's one of the tricks you can use in the studio. But I can't remember that specific thing. It was just hard for him to do that, and of course, if you can skip it, you want to do it. It's work. So yeah.
And how is he as a singer to work with? Is he easy to work with in studio?
Oh, yeah, he's fabulous. James is the kind of person that once he's in a working situation, he's totally focused, and he just wants to perform as well as possible, and he knows when he fucks up. If you sit doing a rhythm guitar tracks and he fucks up, he stops immediately, you just go back a bit, punch in, and continue. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's a very skilled musician.
That's awesome. So, in terms of all 3 records you worked on, I'm sure that the gear that they used changed.
Oh, yeah.
Did it make a significant difference to how you approached recording them?
Yeah, it actually did, because on Master of Puppets, they had the Mesa Boogie endorsement. So we got these Mesa Boogie amps that we were going to use on the album. And I thought they were kind of goofy because, they didn't really do, when it's a treble and you gave it more, it actually got duller. There was a lot of stuff going on with those. But, in the end, they ended up sounding really, really good. Obviously, Master of Puppets is sounding pretty well. But I actually inserted on the insert loop at the back of the amp, I inserted like a professional parametric studio EQ, so I could actually sit in the control room and EQ the amp, the actual amp itself, because I needed to scoop out some of that mid-range, and there was a lot of stuff we did on that. On my old website, which is still up, I have a lot of these notes from the Master of Puppet sessions, and they all have the settings for that parametric EQ on the insert. So yeah, you can go check that out.
Oh, definitely. You know, for me, when it comes to that record, I think one of the underrated songs is Damage Inc. That 1-minute intro where there's all these different, echoey sounds. How did you guys get that?
That is all guitars recorded backwards. A bit like the beginning of Battery. It's the same thing with all those. That's, it's all backwards shit that you reset and you just turn the chord progression around and you turn the tape around, and then once you play it back, you get that kind of freaky acid kind of sound. So yeah, most of that is backwards stuff. I haven't heard it recently, so but I'm sure if I sat down and heard it now, I would be able to tell you what it is. But yeah, a lot of it was probably backwards guitars.
That is awesome. In my opinion, another underrated track from that record is Orion. When it comes to songs like that, Orion and the Call of Ktulu, these instrumental tracks, do you approach recording those songs differently because they're instrumental?
No, same approach, just one job less. That was the lead vocal. But normally on instrumental songs, there were like these huge solos. So actually it's a bit more difficult to record instrumentals because once you don't have the vocals, you need a focus point. So you had to do really interesting, themes and solos and melodies all through the song to make sure that the listener is still paying attention, basically. So yeah, no, it was hard work.
Were you surprised that they had instrumental songs?
No, not really. Yeah, we did that already on the first album, so I'm like, okay, no songs, great. I thought it was a bit long. What's the instrumental on Ride? Ktulu, yeah. But I really like that, and I like the whole story about that. So, yeah.
Oh, for sure. Another great track, in my opinion, from Master of Puppets is Disposable Heroes. That song, to me, sounds like it could have also been on Injustice.
Yeah, it's where they're going after, I think what we did was that kind of thrash thing that we started on Ride the Lightning, we kind of perfect on Master of Puppets, and then, that's another thing I really like about the band. They don't repeat themselves. They don't do Master of Puppets 10 times like some artists. They do one great album and then they copy that like 15 times.
Yeah. In terms of Metallica's development and experimentation, one of the things I find interesting about the band's history is that James Hetfield was hesitant at first about being a singer.
He hated it. It was the painstaking moments when James had to go sing, he wouldn't do it. He just got more and more confident with, once you start selling 500,000 album copies, you kind of go, all right, then they must like it somehow. So I think his confidence grew. And I think the voice is an instrument as well, and he wanted to get better on that. Whether he took singing lessons, I have no idea. He never did when he was with me, when I recorded them. But for sure, his interest in what he could do with the vocal grew as the band matured.
And so in studio, how did he approach recording vocals on the 3 albums you did with the band? Was his approach different each time?
It got more and more serious. And he got better and better at it. We simply did, we did a couple of takes, run-throughs that I kept as much as possible. And then once his voice was like warmed up and ready, we did it line by line from start to finish. And then most of the time we doubled a lot of the bits to make it sound thicker. So he sang it twice on top of each other. Which is a skill and which he got better and better at. Because you need to know what you just did. Even when you do phrasing, you need to know what you did if you have to put one right on top of it. But sometimes you don't want it right on top because it sounds better when they shit like the studio stuff.
Yeah. So how have they grown over the years as people? For example, like we discussed before, James was a bit of a hesitant singer during Ride the Lightning, but by Master of Puppets and Injustice, he's really embracing it. How was that experience for you, seeing them grow and develop over time?
It made me really, really proud. Lars describes it pretty well, that they came from after have done Kill 'Em All as young kids who didn't have a clue about how to record an album, and he basically has the opinion that I taught them to record albums, which makes me pretty proud. But, they've all grown into to men. I think they've grown into wise and clever men. I know James has problems with his addictions, but I mean, who doesn't in this world? So that's his thing, and I'm sure he's going to tackle it. And if he falls back on it, yeah, well, it's fixable. So, there's a lot of things going on in people's heads, but I think they've grown to become really, really good people, and very, very friendly, if you ask me.
When you first met Metallica in 1984 during the making of Ride the Lightning, what was your initial impression of them?
They were, in my opinion, a bunch of young kids with like fire in their ass. They were like fucking going 200 miles an hour, like 24/7. And it was actually inspiring that they had this energy and that they were willing to go the extra mile for that common project that was Metallica. It's what most bands have when they start out. But, the way they've handled the project Metallica during the years is second to none. I think they've done a fabulous job of being themselves, being Metallica, and, also taking care of, the brand Metallica. And I think they've done a good job about that.
Have they kept that fire, in your opinion?
On and off, yeah. I think they're getting there again. I think the last album was killer. It was almost like, okay, let's do an album like in the old days. I was like, yes, please. I actually told Lars that what the fuck is it? What's it called? Hardwired to Self-Destruct. Yeah. He was asking what I thought about it, and I said, that's the first album you've done since, in 20 years that I wish I'd done. And he was like, that's the best criticism I've ever gotten.
That's awesome. And so we spoke a little earlier about how the changes in Metallica's gear from album to album caused you to modify how you recorded them to an extent, at least on a technical level. But equipment aside, did you change the way you approached working with them from album to album, or did you have more or less the same approach?
Well, I had more or less the same approach, and which is the approach I'm still having, which is make sure everybody is feeling good, because, they're in recording an album is probably the apart from playing probably Madison Square Garden or royalty and stuff like that, it's the peak for every band, because whatever you do in the studio with me, people are going to talk about that for the rest of your life, because it's going to come out there. So we talk a lot about vibe with Metallica. The vibe has to be there. We start out by basically getting every gear in, making sure everybody feels comfortable doing all the sounds. And in the case of Metallica, we always starting to be doing B-sides for singles, which was always like cover songs. Because, in a process in the studio, you always tend to get the sound right after a couple of songs. You always tweak and tweak and tweak. And in my opinion, it's stupid starting out with your very best song as the first song you record, and then once you've gotten to song 3, everything sounds the way it's supposed to. So we always started out doing some of the cover songs, and then once we got that out of the way and we thought every sound was like right, that bang where it was supposed to be, we'd start doing their songs.
That's awesome. Is there any one solo of Kirk's that sticks out to you?
The end solo on one is, in my opinion, top 3 in terms of guitar solos in the world.
Do you remember recording one?
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
It was, I liked it. I thought it was one of the best songs that they ever done. So yeah, it was a pleasure recording that, and Lars played really well on that.
I read somewhere that the part in one where the drums start to mimic the sound of machine guns, you got that in one take.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff Lars was a champion at the time. So yeah, I was actually disappointed, because I was looking forward to hearing that particular part of the song like a couple of times, but it was like, okay, fine, good, next. And he was like, what? Yeah, fine, come and have a listen. He didn't believe it himself. We heard it and went, okay, we'll go on. I've always thought Lars was a great drummer, so I know a lot of people says he can't play drums, but I mean, what do they know? So yeah, no, he's a great drummer, and he'd gotten technically better at that point. That doesn't necessarily mean you're a better drummer, that you're technically better, but if you have the musical understanding and the insight Lars has, that made him a better drummer. Yeah, as James says, he's the best drummer in Metallica ever. So there you
go. You know, with the intro where you have the sound of the helicopters and gunfire, etc., I'm assuming you didn't actually go to a war zone to record those sounds. So where did those sounds come from?
They're all taken from sample CDs. I actually have no recollection of doing that at all. I knew it was going to be there, but I don't think we did that. I think they stuck that in there when they mixed. They always set the bar high, so they actually write songs that they have difficulty playing because it is so difficult. And especially on Injustice, that was pretty crazy. But I mean, we ended up doing Injustice more or less like you would have done it today, because there's tons of edits. I mean, Lars would record like half a minute of drums, and then if there's one hit that was slightly off, I would just edit a piece out of the tape. One was slightly too early, I would take one of the bits I've edited out earlier and edit that in, so there's like edits on all the drum tracks. And that's what you can do now on digital workstations, which is what everybody's using to record on. But in those days on analog tape, that is the first time I think ever anybody has done that. So I was actually 10 years ahead of time there.
That's funny. What was the most difficult track to record on Injustice?
I can't remember. None of them were like more difficult than the others. It was just, it just took time. It was a hard working process. It took us about 4.5-5 months to record that album. And I mean, they kind of outbeat themselves on the Black Album. That took 1.5 years. But for the budget and for that time, that was the longest review spent on an album ever.
What did you think of the Black Album?
I thought it sounded great. I thought it was super cool. I loved it. I still do. I think it's a really, really good album.
Did you get any sneak peek or hear any demos before it was released?
Lars came by with the finished master tape. He was in Copenhagen. He came by and played it for me in the studio. He's actually I've actually just written a book. It's in Danish, sorry. But Lars has written the foreword, and he actually speaks about that, and it's pretty funny. I won't tell about that. People are gonna have to buy the book. It's in Danish. Sorry, you're gonna have to learn it. I have the foreword in English. I might post that on my website. We'll see, or we'll get the book translated. But I mean, he was himself scared how I would react to the Black Album, but God was really happy that I liked it. But he came and played it, beforehand, and it was on a little DAT tape, which is a digital tape that is like very, very small. You can have it in your pocket, smaller than an iPhone. And he said, well, yeah, so this is $2 million right here. I think that's what it cost, the album. I thought it sounded really, really, really good. I really liked it.
So the Black Album, of course, marked a development in Metallica's sound. In terms of development, you got to see James, Lars, and Kirk over the course of 3 records, but only one with Jason. Being the new guy and filling in for Cliff Burton, was Jason nervous at all during the making of Injustice?
No, because, I mean, he hung out when we did some of the other stuff. A lot of the times it was just me and Lars in the studio, or me and James in the studio, and Lars and me and Kirk in the studio. But they all came and hung out to see how the progress was going. And so, no, I didn't sense any nervousness at all. I mean, I don't think he had anything to be nervous about. He's a great bass player, and as I said, I've heard the bass tracks, so I know they're great. So
yeah, I would love to hear them one day.
Oh yeah, me too. But the tapes are safely in HQ in San Francisco. So yeah, band has them. I think they're going to keep those under lock and key.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of cool family remixes on YouTube which have the boosted bass.
Yeah. People send me those on and off. I'm not really bothered listening to those. I like the original stuff. That's it. That's the way it turned out. That's the way it's supposed to be. People can have their opinions. That's fine, but don't waste my time but, fucking around with them.
One of the things that record is known for is that lyrically, And Justice is often regarded as the darkest Metallica record. Did it strike you as that when you first heard the songs?
I mean, the whole genre is pretty dark, so I was, it was kind of what I expected. It's only in hindsight that I maybe can see that it was probably a bit darker than some of the other ones.
Another interesting thing And Justice is noted for is Kirk Hammett's guitar work. You mentioned a little earlier how highly you think of his end solo on One. In general, how is Kirk in the studio? Is he easy to work with?
Yes and no. What happens is that he gets the songs and he starts composing solos. And then once we're done with the rhythm guitars and the bass tracks, we stick his solos on, alternate between vocals and solos. And sometimes he would have an idea and he would play a solo, and it was always me and Lars sitting kind of coaching him on that. And he would sometimes come with stuff we didn't really like, and some of the solos are actually composed by Kirk, Lars, and me, and in cooperation, because we change it. Lars is really, really good at that. Lars could be a great record producer one day if he wanted to, because he's got a good vision of what you need sound wise and progression wise, and all his references are old metal albums. So yeah, some of the solos they were kept right off the bat, and some of the solos we had to work hard with, and we changed a lot in those. But it was still just work. We want this to be the best thing ever, so we have to put in the effort.
That's awesome. And Kirk, he's of course famous for various reasons, one of them being his use of the wah pedal. From your experience, does he approach the wah pedal in a unique way?
I think he's one of the few people in the world where it kind of becomes a part of his body. I think he uses it pretty well. I'm a big fan. That's one of the other things we wanted to do was change the sound during the solos, which not a lot of people did. That they play a solo and it would be the same sound from start to beginning. We did a lot of experimenting by doing changing sounds, and even putting harmonies on some parts and then coming back to the original, so stuff like that. And that's one of the reasons why everything is so well documented in terms of sounds, because sometimes you had to come back to the sound you started with at the end of the solo, and everything would be changed around like 15 times during the solo. So yeah, his wah work is fantastic. I love when he starts doing that.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I find really interesting about Metallica's history is that even when they were on their independent label Megaforce, they were still selling tens of thousands of records, which is an amazing accomplishment, especially considering they were a new band at the time. Would you happen to have any insight into how Metallica handled the business end of things at that time?
No, they've always had the business end in the States, and I'm in Europe, so I don't know. But from the time they get Q Prime as management, they pretty much take care of all that. But I think Lars is a good entrepreneur, so I think he probably took care of most of that. That's my guess. It's because the drive and energy Lars has that he's been booking concerts left and right to make sure they come out and play, which is the best way to present your music. So I don't know that anything about the business side, but I would guess that a lot of that has to do with Lars being the driving force he actually is.
A lot of people say that Lars is the businessman of the band, so to speak. Would you agree with that? Is that fair to say?
I think so, yeah.
Interesting. In terms of Cliff, I've heard him being compared to a mixture of the Misfits, Zeppelin, and Beethoven.
Actually, a pretty good comparison, because he had that good Zeppelin drive and Misfits, and then he had that classical approach. So yeah, that's a pretty good description. He was a crazy bass player actually, because he didn't like headphones. So actually, for the basses, the 2 albums I did with him, I actually hooked up a pair of speakers and stuck his bass amp in another room, and he could run around and play his bass to the sound on the speakers, so he didn't have to hear headphones. So it's just like playing live. And that's the way we got the best performances. And he did some pretty crazy stuff. So I normally tell people that some of the solos they think are guitar solos, that's Cliff on his bass, because he had all these pedals he fiddled about. But he was innovative in a way that no other bass players was at that time.
Between Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, did Cliff grow as a musician, or was he essentially the same player?
No, I thought he'd gotten a lot better. I mean, they went basically on tour for most of the time, and that really sharpens your chops as a musician. So they were all of them were way better when we did Master of Puppets. But I mean, so was I, because I knew what the band was all about.
Interesting. Do you remember recording the Cliff Burton tribute on Injustice, To Live Is to Die?
To Live and to Die, exactly, yeah. To Live and to Die, yeah. That was pretty emotional, because he wrote most of that. And we did a lot of stuff, We remembered Cliff doing that.
That's awesome. And so, Fleming, how did you personally get into music?
I've always liked music. I started fiddling with tape recorders when I was 12. And then we have a program where when you're in the 9th grade, you go out, test a work situation. Like if you want to be a dentist, you go out and you look at what a dentist does for a week and, stuff like that. I ended up in a recording studio because I liked music. The guy that owned the studio asked me whether I wanted to start a new studio with him, because he could see that this was something I knew something about. And that's how I got into it.